Yes, people. Welcome back to Let's Talk Everything. I'm your trainee psychotherapist. Welcome. Yes, if you don't know, my name is actually Welcome, spelt the same way you see on the doormat and everywhere else. And if you have been here before, don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for the people that are showing love to the channel. Listen, it's early days. I'm still working this channel around being a dad, training as a therapist, and just a hectic schedule of just life itself. So, yeah, this is a time where I get to sit down and really just share my thoughts. For now, it's just a bit spontaneous, off the cuff, and later on, as it grows, it will be much more in depth. And as time goes on, when there's more time, I'll be able to do the much more in-depth sort of conversations with the great editing and so forth. But in this time, I like to fit this little videos and stuff like that within the schedule that I'm in. But anyways, I digress. Once again, thank you for the love and support. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Check out my match vlog that when I went to West Ham against Liverpool. If you're interested in therapy or what it's like to be a trainee
people. Welcome back to Let's
please
Talk
check
Therapy.
out my other video
I'm
where
your trainee
I talk about the
psychotherapist.
difference
Welcome.
between seeing
If you
adults
don't know,
versus
now you know.
children. Nevertheless, let's talk about today's video. A while back, I went on LBC talking about fatherhood. My missus messaged me saying, "Oh, they're talking about fatherhood on LBC. Why don't you call in and say your little two pence?" So I did that. I wanted to put my audio here, but when it came to finding where that was, I couldn't find it. So you don't get to hear me say what I said on LBC, which is a bit unfortunate. But Ali Mirage was the presenter at the time, and yeah, it was really nice to call in LBC. So, anyways, I spoke about fatherhood, and that is in today's video. That's what I'll be talking about, fatherhood. But not in a sense where I'm talking about the sort of absent father or the anxious father or the narcissistic father. I wanted to talk more about a positive sort of lens about fatherhood. If you see in my videos, I've done a presentation on fatherhood, which that was a presentation that I did for my course, and I showcased it on here. But I think I wanted to do much more of a much more subtle, just free from sort of thinking. So if you don't know, I have two boys, 5 and 3, and another baby on the way. But I wanted to talk about the beginning and the here and now. Beginning, after my missus had a first trimester, and she kind of got understanding. Okay, yeah, I'm pregnant. Understanding her body, reading books, what her body needs and doesn't need. After that, because we had to sit down and have a conversation, I really wanted to hear what she had to say. And people always say, does the guy have an input? Well, you do. You always will have an input. When there's two people involved into the making of a baby.
What did he say?
I already knew that, and I said, okay, my thoughts and my feelings that will come up, I'm gonna park that to really accommodate for Julieta during her first trimester. Went away, first trimester done. The conversation was with myself. What type of father do I want to be? And I already knew that I didn't want to be the father that society thought that father should be, especially as a black man. The stigma around black fathers, the narrative around black fathers. I knew that I didn't want to be that type of father because I knew that didn't really serve me. The absent father, the anxious father, the narcissistic father. The time around me finding out that I was going to be a dad, it was almost the same time that there was the conversation about me training as a therapist. And don't get me wrong, it was so beneficial learning about therapy in that time as well, and learning about how our emotions can manifest in many different ways, especially when you are a parent. And quickly enough, it's always about reflecting, right? It's always about reflecting on yourself. And that's what the general consensus that I had on when speaking to Ali Mirage on the LBC was the fact that we need to ask ourselves questions. In society and in this climate with so much information out there, there are so many things that tells you this is what makes you a good father. This is what makes you a bad father. If you don't do this, that means you're not a good father. Or if you do this, this will make you a good father. In today's society, we will shame fathers, right? Let's not even talk about the conversations that, for example, like Backchat or these other sort of platforms and the way they speak about sort of black fathers. Don't get me wrong, I do think we're at a point where we are changing the conversation when it comes to speaking about black fathers, but just fathers in general, right? I think there's a change of conversation. And that's what I wanted to bring here, where I wanted to bring the sort of positive sort of outlook and what does it look like as just being a father in general. Present, understanding one's emotions, parking our own sort of emotions to accommodate our children's needs. And this is obviously for all parents, but I wanted to speak about just fathers specifically, because I think just as the beneficial way of fathers are beneficial to a child, just the same way as mothers, there are differences. And I think people don't really seem to talk about that. I don't talk about whether or not things are really sort of good or bad. I just think I look at things as what is more beneficial, what can be seen as an improvement, what can be seen as a better understanding of ourselves and our children. For example, the biggest word that people started talking about when I started growing up was generational trauma. And especially learning about therapy, I went away and really understanding my sort of own traumas, right? What was it like not having a father as well? Do you know what's crazy? I remember when I was young, I never really resented my father so much. Me and my father's relationship was very transactional. My dad was the fun dad. And I think most people can sort of relate when, if your parents are split up, you got your dad who buys you the PlayStation, buys you the BlackBerry, you're allowed to stay up late at night. So going to my dad's was the fun side, right? But where my mum used to complain, where it's like you get to be the fun dad, and I have to be the bad cop, where I have to say no, that money that your dad is giving, I have to put it into school shoes. Where these times I'm thinking, why are you buying me school shoes when I want more football boots? But obviously the priority was for me to have new school shoes. When if you saw my kickers, oh my gosh, like I was playing football, my kickers were talking. Do you know what I mean? I needed new school shoes, but at the time you don't really see that. But what was the craziest part is when I became a dad, it was like, right, like I'm very present with my kids. I'm very in tune with my kids. And I started feeling a bit resentful towards my own pops. And I was thinking, oh, I was reminded that this emotional connection, as much as, yes, a lot of the times I use a transactional sort of gaslighting. I will say to my kids, if change your pajamas and I'll give you a sweet. Very bad, but it is what it is. Because listen, if I leave my children to their own device when it comes to putting their pajamas on, we'll be here all day. So yes, I'll put the sweets. Yes, I'll use bribery. Yes, I'll say the sweets. Yes, I'll say the TV. Yes, I'll say the crisp. Listen, it gets things ticking sometimes. And sometimes in this climate, we already know parent life in the UK is very fast, man. It's quick. It's quick. Even me doing this video, I'm very conscious that as my kids are in the kitchen, I know that, okay, eventually I will have to do the bedtime routine. But anyways, so I started resenting my own pops because I was like, as much as my dad bought me all the good stuff, that emotional connection, I just don't know. And whereby my kids know me, like my kids were playing about and they was like, oh, let's pretend to be dad. And if I had to turn around, as much as I can remember what my dad is like and 100%, my dad was obviously around, at the same time, that sort of deep emotional connection was a bit sort of absent. So when it came to asking myself about the question, okay, as much as, don't get me wrong, I don't resent my dad so much. I looked at my dad and I was like, okay, you was a dad for me, but I know that I don't want to parent my children saying, because my dad wasn't like this to me, I'm going to do it to you. Because I didn't want to project my sort of resentment that I may or may not recognize, or I may still have. I don't want to pass on my bitterness. I don't want to pass on some of the sort of traits that my dad had onto my kids. I think this is where I'm speaking about my adult clients. When there's a crisis that happened or there's an opportunity to find oneself, that opportunity should be taken. That's self-discovery. And I think fatherhood is such a great extension. What I find is, as a parent is,
Stop it. Get some help.
beauty, and that's why it comes back to the question of finding what type of father do I want to be. It's looking at your given circumstances and understanding that parenting also changes. And I think sometimes what we find as parents is that I'm a parent like this, and this is how it is. I will change my values or my principles. I think a lot of parents don't understand is that we are different parents to different kids. My first son was a COVID baby, so I was followed for a whole year compared to Kamari that I was only given, to be fair, I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to cap it, and I want to be honest. At the time, I was on probation working at Sainsbury's and I got fired, right? I got fired. I think I didn't pass probation because they actually asked me to do something outside the time that I finished. Um, and I was like, bro, I finished. And apparently, because they tell me to do something, I have to do it. Didn't really set a line. And also at the same time, get me wrong, it was a bit of arrogance, a bit of stupidity, a bit of naivety, and also just knowing that wasn't something that I really liked as well. I was working in a warehouse where the truck comes in, you have to load off all the items on the truck. Absolutely carnage of a job. But listen, the pressure. I'll be honest. I'll be very honest. I remember that walk home. Actually, no, I lied. I lied. I lied. It wasn't Sainsbury's. It was Vodafone. I apologize. I apologize, people. It was actually Vodafone. So with my second child, I was working at Vodafone. I was still on probation. Don't get me wrong, I was still on probation, and I think I did something so silly, whatever. But I did something so silly and so dumb. Came into the office that morning. I got fired. I just had my second baby. I was seen as the breadwinner at the time. Julieta was still doing her degree in psychology. So I remember straight back to home, and I started crying. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna show a bit of vulnerability here. I was in tears, absolutely tears, because it was like, what does this sort of mean for myself? I lost the job. The job market, even at this time, even now, is gone absolutely worse. But at the time as well, I was thinking it was decent pay, good money, wasn't far from home, and the idea was I do that while I started building up my training as a therapist, right? And I remember the walk home. And I remember getting home, and Julieta knew. She knew something was up, and it was something to do about the job. And I told her, hey, I got fired. Things to my missus at the time. Let me tell you now, she wanted to absolutely lose it. I can tell you now, she wanted to lose it. But she knew that how upset I was, that she comforted me and, really just said, it's okay. We'll try to figure it out. Don't get me wrong, that couple months, especially with my second born, I was absent. I was absent. I was trying to look for jobs. I was stressed out. That has an effect onto the child at that time, right? Of course, things got better. It changes. But the idea that you're a different parent, and to be the parent that I know that I can change. Benefit of knowing ourselves as a parent is knowing our kids, knowing that we also have flaws and we have things that we don't like, parts of ourselves, or we do as a parent that we're not so happy about, but also to give ourselves compassion. I wanted to involve compassion, and also be for fathers, this whole sort of nonchalant or sort of stoicism that the patriarchy has presented itself over the years, and that's something that I'll talk about another time. But this whole not to feel, to show, and I never subscribed to that, because I think one of the beauty things that men can do when they put their feelings and the showing is even much more powerful. I think most importantly, we're showing parts of ourselves and those interpersonal relationships. When it comes to speaking about parenting, people always want to go for the father and child or mother and child. My son's name's Casper. My second son's Kamari. The interpersonal relationships are the most important. Welcome and Casper. Welcome and Kamari. Yes, on a surface level, there's always going to be the father and child dynamic where we always have to set our boundaries in place as a father, and child will push those boundaries. Children will always stretch the boundaries, push those boundaries to the limits. When boundaries do break, this is where we have to know our children. Okay, why did that happen? What is the feelings that you had when this happened? Why are you feeling like this? Is there anything that I can help? What do you recognize from this situation? Those type of questions. I'm paraphrasing here, but the idea of that, always knowing what your kid sees, what is your kid's sort of worldview. Because bear in mind as well, when it's children growing up, everything is new to them, right? So we are the jobs as a parent to sort of steer them into the sort of right direction. But what hits home is the values and principles. And also for me as well as raising boys as well, is to raise my boys as gentlemen. That's the most important thing. And I always start as being a gentleman, it's looking at yourself and understanding I've got respect and manners for oneself. And that's only reflected by you, your person as well. And it's not as the dad that has those values, it's welcome that has those values. Because tomorrow I'll speak to another dad and he said his values and principles are these, right? But he's still the same bracket as a father. So therefore, and I think collaboratively and just knowing about in that company of just different fathers that have different ways of operating and recognizing that the reason why you have these values and principles because you're co-parenting. The reason why you have these values and principles because you know what? You are a stay-at-home dad. Your wife goes out and she is the breadwinner, and there ain't no problem, but your values and principles might be very different. We can speak on surface level what that fatherhood sort of means, but that interpersonal relationship is the key difference that I would say separate for someone who is just plays the role of the father, play the role as just a parent is never just enough. We can't do that, and people have do that, but we coast until we hit a breaking point and be like, the child sits there thinking, "Raw, like me, my dad was a cool dad. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know much about my dad. Yes, my dad gave me all the cool things that we had, but I don't know much about my dad compared to my mum, who my mum was emotionally invested." And people will say, "Oh, men are not really emotional." Men are, but we choose not to show it. We choose to suppress it because of the patriarchy that has kind of told us. And people might think, "Oh, feminism, of course, I could say that as well." But I think patriarchy has been one of our biggest downfalls of modern society and modern fathers. I think this Andrew Tate, this whole idea, or Jordan Peterson, who else can I think? This sort of Prince Andrew, the fact that we don't take accountability for our own actions, and also just to be like, "Raw, I don't feel that. It shouldn't be like that." Or we have to have the sense of thinking logically about things. It's for some reason, for certain men, feeling is like, "Oh, we can't feel. We can't feel our emotions because we're seen as weak." Who the fuck said that? Let me tell you something now. Most of the time it's because people have manipulated that. Don't get me wrong, people have abused that. But I think one of the biggest traits of real men, I would believe, is that they're emotional intelligent. Emotional intelligence of men goes far in life. But what kind of stops us from men is egos. And that's a whole nother conversation that I will speak about another time. But at the same time, I just really wanted to emphasize when it comes to fatherhood, I don't think ego has its place, especially when it comes to our own children. Ego has never had a place. That sort of, defensive mechanism that men have in certain situations that we use to protect ourselves, maybe for right reasons, or maybe to our own detriment. But when it comes to children, because let me tell you now, our children may not have the articulation to vocalize that, but they see it. They see right through us. And that's one biggest thing that I talk about right now, where when I see my son, it's the most craziest part about seeing my children, especially as my eldest son has grown up as well. And I think this goes to show why the interpersonal relationship or the connection between you and your children is so really important, and it goes beyond father and child. It goes beyond mother and child. And what I noticed now, that as much as, don't get me wrong, I try to install the sort of values and principles that my mum had, or the tradition has, or society has, and I realized it doesn't sort of work. And I had to really sit down and really tell myself, okay, I need to find the values and principles that really aligned with me, and really aligns with my missus, and it really aligns with the children that I have. I think when it comes to fatherhood, I encourage most fathers to be very much in tune about your feelings. The idea that men shouldn't hold their feelings is cap. It's bullshit. I'm going to say it outright. It's bullshit. You're not a weak man if you have feelings. It's so bizarre because certain men that are into football will feel a type of way that the team lost, but their child is saying that they love them, but you don't really feel much, or you don't feel as much. Do you know what I mean? Or as if our feelings can't be in this sort of realm. Your wife loves you, cares for you, or not so much because she might see me as weak. Bullshit. Man can think logically, but man can also feel. Especially if a man can feel and has that emotional intelligence to articulate his emotions, to be honest about his emotions, I believe that is much more beneficial, yes, for your partner, but most importantly for your kids, especially for the boys that are growing up in today's sort of climate where you got anarchy that is polarizing our landscape when it comes to men. Andrew Tate's, the Prince Andrew, the Bill Gates, the Jeffrey Epsteins. For some reason, these men will get your BBC News headlines, and these guys subconsciously will promote an idea of don't feel, and you don't have to be responsible for the fuckeries that you guys do. No. The biggest strength that a man can have, especially a gentleman, is taking accountability for his actions, taking accountability for his one thoughts, even if people may not agree or agree, but also having emotional intelligence to understand not only his but others as well. Now, this is a comment that can be broadened to men and women, but I wanted to speak more specifically about fathers. So that's it, people. It was off the cuff. It went all the way around there and there. But like I said, this is a video that is just purely for if you're cleaning, if you're going for a walk, or you need something in the background, play this video. I'm your trainee psychotherapist. Welcome, who talks about everything and anything. And don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any comments that you want to feel free to put down, please do that, right? We're growing the channel. We're making this channel big. And so, yeah, people, take care.